Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I thought I would do a sit-down Q&A today because I finished all of my exams for first year law. I submitted yesterday, so I'm very relieved about that because I've been absent for like the past week because I was very much involved in my exams for 24 hours and I've submitted the last one yesterday morning, which is criminal. I've just got a multiple choice for legal foundations, which is like 18% of the grade, and you have to complete it in like half an hour, which is on the 1st of next month. So I'm kind of not counting that in my head. Obviously, like, I will try and everything, but in my head I've finished exams, which I'm very, very happy about. Sit down video in celebration and answer all of your questions about first year law because I've had quite a few since my first video. So my first video I did first year law, like what to expect and how to survive it basically. So I will link that down below if you want to watch that as well. But I thought I would answer your questions from that video, from the other videos in the YouTube comments, and I also popped it on my Instagram story. So I've got some questions from there as well. So be sure to follow me on there if you haven't already because I'll be posting some more stuff like that in the future. I'm going to try and give as comprehensive answers as possible to give you a proper overview of what it's like to do first year law, because I feel like I went into law quite blind, like I didn't really know what to expect or what the course would be like. So I'm going to try and give you an idea of what the workload's like, what the course is like and all of that. So if you don't already know, I go to Exeter Uni and I've completed my first year now pretty much, just waiting on those grades. My answers will be Exeter sort of based, but I think they will be applicable across most law courses, to be honest. And some of it will definitely be applicable, but like obviously workload and stuff, it will vary from uni to uni. So I will just speak about my experience, but I'm sure it's broadly comparable to other universities as well. So let's get started. So the first question I had was, how much work do you get a week? And another question that I also got was, how much reading do you get a week? So I will address those together. So work-wise, with law, the main thing that we get set is reading. It's not as much like essays to be handed in and stuff. So we get set reading for every module. We've got 4 modules to complete either weekly or every 2 weeks. So cycles are in 2 weeks, so you do each topic for 2 weeks. Some modules will do reading for the 2 weeks and some will do it weekly. So it just depends on who does the module. I've taken an example of some of the reading that we would have been set, so I can give you a rough idea of what actually you would be set rather than giving you hypotheticals. So for the 4 modules, we've got contract, criminal, CNA and legal foundations. So for contract, we were set page 49 to 65 in your textbook and 89 to 116 and 604 to 633 in case there's a material book as well. So for contract, we were set sort of like 30 to 50, maybe a little bit more of pages. It can really vary on the week, but obviously because it's quite dense, it can still take you quite a long time to do, and that's per week for contract. And then also for criminal, we got set about 60 pages of reading for one of the cycles, so that would have been 30 a week. And also we had to read a law commission report for this one, and they give you like a list of cases you should know of as well, but usually you'll have covered them in the lectures. And also for criminal, they suggest that you read at least one of the articles for each cycle, like a journal article written by a scholar, so that you can achieve a 2-1 or above, which I'm not sure is necessarily like correlates because the questions won't always be on the articles that you've read about, but I think as a general rule it sort of contributes to your greater understanding and how to sort of apply analysis across different areas of the law. So it probably is important to do that, but it's not like a direct correlation between you've read this article and you can then definitely apply it in the exam. It's not quite like that. Obviously you will need to be citing scholars and stuff in your exam, so it will be useful for that, but you won't always necessarily be able to use that exact article or cite that scholar because it won't always be relevant to the question that comes up to cover that topic. Constitutional law, we get given about a chapter for every cycle, which is a chapter every 2 weeks, which could be anywhere between sort of like 30 to 70 pages. So another like 35 pages a week, maybe a little bit less. And then you also generally would have a scholar's article to read every 2 weeks. They could be quite long as well, so they could be up to like 20 pages as well probably. And obviously that is quite dense as well. DNA give you specific articles to read. And legal foundations, for one of the cycles that I've sampled, we got 3 chapters of the textbook to read in 2 weeks. But legal foundations reading is sort of different because you don't need to be able to critically analyse the law or anything in legal foundations, because the exam for us is you just have to apply legal materials and you don't need to have any knowledge of that law before. You don't need to know how to use that law. It's more like fact gathering for the multiple choice part of the exam, which accounts for about 20%, a little bit less than your grade. So for that reading, you sort of skim it more and just pick out facts rather than trying to sort of like understand it and pick it apart. So it's a different sort of reading for that. And also in the work-wise question, you are supposed to prepare for your seminars as well usually. So you'll get like a list of stuff that you're supposed to go through in your seminars. And for my university, we have syndicates, which is sort of unsupervised, a smaller group, where we go through some work and then we take that work to our seminar, or we go into a slightly bigger group with a tutor who will like talk us through everything that we've worked through. And you are sort of supposed to prepare for your seminars and stuff as well, but that's not something that I ever really did. I sort of went in and then tried to absorb the information and like write it all down and fill it all in. But it probably would be beneficial to do the work before, ensure that you're developing your problem solving and all of that. I personally didn't feel like I needed to do it. Not necessarily that I didn't need to do it, I just felt like I didn't really want to do it, so I didn't, which has worked out okay for me so far. So I think you sort of find your rhythm. But yeah, so I'd say about 30 pages a week for each topic, and then also seminar prep if you do that, and also like articles for each cycle if you get given them. So that can actually take up quite a lot of time. And I would say that you do need to do the reading. Overall, the workload at the beginning seems like it's quite a lot, to be perfectly honest. But as you get further through the year, you get better at coping with it and being able to get it done a lot quicker. In the end, like, I think you're supposed to work uni like a full-time job, but in the end, after I'd settled into uni, I think probably like a few weeks in, or maybe like a month and a bit in, I probably did about 3 hours of work a day on average, I would say. It was a pretty standard day, which doesn't sound like a lot, but yeah, so the workload is manageable. It obviously depends on the person, how much work you do as a person and how much work you feel like you need to do well, but it is manageable. It's not a ridiculous amount. So I can sit here with retrospect after finishing first year and be like, it's fine. But obviously when you're in it and when you first start doing it, it can be quite stressful and seem like quite a lot of reading to do, but you sort of fall into your pattern and it's not too bad in the end. So yeah, that is the workload and the reading per week. I hope that wasn't too convoluted. Following on from that, another question I got is the workload worse than other courses? Now, I only do law, so obviously I can't give you a direct comparison because I have only done one course. But compared to my flatmates, I would say I potentially did a little bit more work than some of my flatmates, but I think it depends massively on the person. So if you're the sort of person that will do all the set work, then obviously you're going to be spending a lot more time on work than someone who doesn't do the set work and doesn't feel like they need to. So we only had to write, throughout the whole year, we only had to write one CNA essay that was formative, so it didn't count towards your final grade. Then we had to write one summative CNA, which did count towards your final grade. We had 2 48 hours for criminal, and the highest one would go to your final grade, so you just have 48 hours to complete either a problem question or an essay question. It was different either time. And then for contract we had, I believe it was 48 hours to complete either a problem or an essay question to submit and get feedback, but those were only formative. That was the whole year, that's all that we had to hand in. And then at the end of the year we were supposed to do presentations, but they got converted into essays. So around the time I was revising, I was also writing a legal foundations essay that would have been a presentation and a contract essay that would have been a presentation as well. So throughout the whole year we didn't actually have that much work to hand in. So obviously it's quite a lot of independent study and regulating yourself, whereas if I compare that to another course, for example like English, I had 2 flatmates that did English and I seem to remember them having to hand in quite a lot of essays, and also I had a flatmate who did history, and as far as I remember she had to hand in essays and essay plans and things like that. I wouldn't necessarily say we had more work. I would say we probably had more reading to do and perhaps less marked work. As a whole, I don't think I'd be able to say that we had more work than other people. I feel inclined to say that if I had done another course, I might have personally done less work because I felt like I had to work quite hard to ensure that I actually do keep up with law, whereas before at my A-levels I didn't really do work throughout the year, I just revised at the end. But with law, I felt much more inclined to work throughout the year, so I didn't fall behind, because obviously it's a lot of information and a lot of new information and new ways of working that you haven't done before. So I did work consistently throughout the year, whereas perhaps I wouldn't have done if I did something else. So the next question is, did you do any societies? And another question was, how do you balance your social and work life? So I actually wasn't a member of any societies. Went to the societies fair and I thought there were quite a few things I might be interested in. I went to a powerlifting introduction session, which I really enjoyed, but after that I got freshers flu, and I was really ill for quite a long time, so I wasn't really training. And I just thought, I'm not going to put myself through that at the moment. But societies are quite expensive. Also, I felt like I had to join the Law Society, but I don't think you do. So anyone who joined it, I don't think they really went to any of the events. So obviously if you know you're going to go to the events, 100% go for it, but you don't need to be a member of the Law Society for the sake of it. So save your money, because I wasn't, and I was absolutely fine. Might do it next year to go to like talks or thing that they offer, which I will look into, but I found that I didn't need it for first year, and for me it would have been a waste of money. So I'm not exemplary for managing loads of societies and stuff. But social and work-life balance, I would just make sure that I'd always done all my work before I went out, so I wasn't too stressed about it. I think I probably bailed on going out 1 or 2 times because I had too much work to do, and that was when I had essays set that needed to be in at a certain time. But if you manage your time well, I don't think you should be giving up any of your social commitments really because of the course, so I think you should be absolutely fine with that. And to give you sort of an example of how my time is filled that is similar to perhaps if you're a member of society, is that I train at the gym like 5 times a week consistently, and I still had time for that. In a society, you should have time for that, and you should be able to balance that with your social life and everything as well. It's different for every person, whereas one person will be doing loads of work to get to the same stage as another person. It will really depend on you and how you can balance it. And like I said, at the beginning of the year, I struggled a little bit to make sure that I could get on top of the work and stay keeping up with it. As I got a little bit further through the year, I found it a lot easier to keep on top of it. So I think I'm saying this not remembering how stressed I was at some points, and I'm not gonna lie, I was stressed. Like when I was trying to apply for first year insight schemes and stuff, I was stressed with trying to do that and my reading and everything else. So it's not all amazing and easy all the time, that's not what I'm trying to say at all, but it is generally manageable. You should be able to manage your social life and your reading and everything and still do well. It's finding the balance of knowing when you need to work hard and when you don't necessarily need to. Another question was, how do you take notes? So I've been asked to do a video on this, which I probably will do at some point, but you'll have to bear with me. And also, do people write notes or take them on laptops in lectures? So for me, I write my notes on my laptop in lectures and in general now, which isn't what I used to do at A-level. But I would say in lectures you don't really have time to be handwriting stuff. I mean, if that's what you like to do, absolutely 100% go for it, but you won't be able to get all the information down, I wouldn't think. You would then have to go back and watch the lecture again to make sure that you get everything and pause it and things like that. What a lot of people do, and this is something that I do, is I just have the PowerPoint open, and it depends on the lecturer because some of them will put a lot on the PowerPoint and some of them will just put a few words and you have to like type what they're saying. And then I'll just copy and paste the important bits from the PowerPoint and then fill in my notes underneath as well as they're talking. And also when I'm doing the reading and everything, then I'll also use my laptop. I'll just pop in anything from the textbook and the casebooks into my lecture notes that I've missed or any depth I need to add. I also have separate documents for scholars' articles, which I make more in-depth notes in a separate document for each module for scholars' articles. And then I also put like a 2-line summary into my lecture notes as well, so I know roughly what that scholar is saying for a really short summary of the article. And I'm writing a larger essay that I can then go back and read a summarised version of the article that I've made in my scholars' articles document, rather than having it clog up my lecture notes. So another question which I thought was a really interesting one was, how do the essay structures differ? And I did English literature at A-level, so this is quite an interesting comparison for me to do. Obviously I don't really have anything else to compare it to other than that. A lot of the time we used to have to include a paragraph to argue against the argument that we've set out, and then perhaps say why that's wrong or why we don't agree with it. Whereas you don't have to do that in law. Like, it will say critically discuss, but generally you're going for one argument and you're building towards making that argument as strong as possible. And a way that you might do that is say, this scholar says this, but I think it's much more convincing to say this. Or you might say, this scholar says one thing and I agree to this extent, but I think it's more convincing in this way. So that will strengthen your argument a lot, but you don't specifically have to argue against your own points. Scholars' articles are really, really, really important. So that's basically how I build my essays, is you read loads of articles on the topic and then you decide what you think about it, but you also have to use those articles in your essays. So finding your own sources can be a challenge in itself, which is different obviously from any essays that you used to have to write before. I would say the main differences lie with having to find and use scholars' articles for your arguments, because they're really, really important. And I thought I might do a whole video on how to write a first class essay for law. So let me know if that's something you'd be interested in, because I've planned that out with everything that I've learned from this year in how to write a first class essay. And I think if you can go in with that head start of knowing what I did wrong in first year in my first essays and then how I improved them, you should be doing good, because that is something that I definitely would like to have seen before I went into first year. The next question is, do you enjoy it? Which is a good question actually. I really, really like the course. I haven't just done it because it's like a prestige course or really highly considered. I absolutely love it. There are modules that I like more than others, obviously, but it's absolutely a bit of me. Like, I love reading about sort of like social justice and things like that, and constitutional law really speaks to me, and so does criminal law. I love reading scholars' articles, I love learning about the law, I love looking at how the law sort of like plays into social justice, being able to analyse the law, having a look at how the law came to be, how it is, all of those sorts of things. And I'm already really excited to write my dissertation, but I think for me personally, I prefer the socio-legal side of it, so how the law sort of relates to people, because that's my sort of interest. Another question is, what are your favourite modules? So in order, I would say my favourite module is probably constitutional law, which I absolutely love. Like, it's an absolute bit of me. Criminal law, which I also really like. Like I said, I really like the sort of socio-legal side, so reading into like the wrongs behind the offences and why they're criminalised, and the effect that the law can have, the effect that these offences can have on people. I don't know what to say about legal foundations, but more like legal skills, legal foundations. I didn't find that I took a huge amount away from it. And my least favourite module was contract law. Nothing against contract law at all, but it was just such abstract notions in my mind. Like, because I can link constitutional law to like people and politics and all of that, I find it so interesting, and I can do the same with criminal. But contract law is just such like abstract concepts. I think perhaps if I was applying it in the real world, I would find it more interesting. It's probably the most difficult, but I might find it the most difficult because I don't enjoy it. Because I think a lot of people find CNA quite difficult. So yeah, I'd say CNA and criminal are my favourites. Another question is it really competitive? Which is something that I heard about as well before I studied law. Law students are really competitive and not very friendly or helpful, and they're your future competitors in the law career world, which I would say is true to an extent, but not really. Like, a lot of my law friends are willing to sort of help each other and ask questions and all of that. I would say our course, perhaps people are less willing to share their answers or share notes and that sort of thing, because I know some of my friends from other courses say that the answers have been shared online and they have group chats where they talk about answers and things like that. It's not that sort of culture in law, but I would say I've got a lot of law friends and everyone's very friendly. So it's competitive to the extent that people perhaps wouldn't share their answers. It's not competitive to the extent that people are unfriendly about it. Perhaps if you were in a less friendly social group than I am, or knew different people than I do, it might be a little bit more competitive. But from my experience, it's been absolutely fine and all my law friends are lovely. The next question is, was it what you expected? So like I said before, I went into law quite blind. Like, I didn't really know what it would entail. I don't know if I was willingly ignorant or what was going on there, but I don't really know what I expected, so to an extent it's probably not what I expected. In the sense that you're analysing the law, writing essays about it, yes. In the sense that you have to answer problem questions about the law, perhaps I didn't expect that, but that's not something that I couldn't have found out if I hadn't looked into it. Also, scholars' articles, I perhaps didn't realise that I would have to read so many scholars' articles about the law, but also if I'd looked into that, I'm 100% sure I could have found out that that would have been something, or even if I'd thought about it further than I perhaps did, I probably would have thought that. But yeah, looking back on it, I don't really think I knew what I expected, which is always reassuring, isn't it? The next question is, do you do any extra reading? So I'm assuming this means past all of the reading that we're set. And I would say I do. So for my revision, I read scholars' articles. I read at least 2 for every cycle for criminal and contract, which definitely helped like deepen my understanding. Like I said earlier, even if they weren't directly applicable, by reading scholars' articles, you sort of see how they analyse stuff and how they look at the law, and it can really help you across the board to see different perspectives and see how to view the law and how to pick it apart and things like that. And I also read books on sort of like social things, like social inequalities and things like that, which I think have helped me broadly to sort of understand social injustices. I find it really, really useful that I have a lot of knowledge behind me about that, and I have formed quite a lot of opinions on it. So I think it really strengthens my essays that I do a lot of that sort of reading, but I don't think it's something that you necessarily would have to do. It's just something that I'm really interested in. So I do extra reading for revision, and that is off the reading list. And obviously you have to do extra reading when you're writing essays as well, which you have to find yourself. And I also read some sort of books that do have applicability because I'm constantly reading, so I read non-fiction that is applicable to law, but not necessarily directly. It contributes to my broader understanding of the law and the world and how they relate to each other, I would say. And another question is, do you need to buy all those textbooks? So I showed them in my first video, and I would say from being at the end of first year, no, you don't have to buy the textbooks that they say. Obviously it's useful because you can just read the pages that they've set, but what's in those textbooks is available in other textbooks, and other people might write it in a way that you prefer. If you want an easy ride, I would say 100% buy the textbooks that are recommended, but you don't necessarily need to buy the new editions, which is what we were led to believe at the beginning of the year. So I bought all my textbooks new, and I 100% think I could have bought the older ones without whatever was included in the new editions, because I really don't think it would have been that valuable for me to spend an extra like 20 quid per textbook. I was really worried about it and having to buy the proper textbooks and buy them new and all of that, but I would say don't. They make it seem like you need new ones, or in my case I felt like they did. But you don't. I would say buy the ones they recommend, probably because it's useful, but all those topics are available in other textbooks, they're available at the library, and you can buy secondhand books, because I really, really doubt that what's in the newer edition that they say means you've got to buy this year's edition rather than last year's edition will be the difference between you getting a 2-2 and a 2-1, or the difference between you getting a 2-1 and a first. Like, I cannot imagine what would need you to spend an extra however much money to buy this brand new textbook than just buying an older edition. I'm sure it's fine. You might have to look at the pages to make sure you're reading the right topic, but it's not an absolute imperative that you must buy these new textbooks that they recommend. So try not to worry about it. If you have any questions about it, just let me know down below and I'll try and answer them. And then a nice one to finish off is, what is the best and what is the worst thing about law? So the best thing is probably learning about the law and how it's applicable to real people in real life, but being able to learn about things I genuinely find really interesting at a higher level, and hearing such good lecturers speak about it and reading such good materials. I think that's such a privilege to be able to have such a good education on something that I find so interesting. The worst thing about law would perhaps be how stressful it is. Like, it is fairly hard, I would say, perhaps a little bit harder than I thought it would be. Necessarily say that's a bad thing. It's quite a positive challenge, I would say. Is that really boring? I don't have a bad thing to say about it. Well, I really, really like the course and I would recommend it. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. I've been filming for 44 minutes. And that's a lot of me not being able to talk. I really hope that's been helpful. If you have any more questions at all about law, first year, Exeter or anything like that, pop them down below and I will try my best to answer them all. Otherwise, I really, really hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope it's been really helpful and perhaps given you a better idea of what first year law entails. And I will be doing more law and Exeter videos, so if you have any suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.